The air inside the View studio carried that unmistakable mix of electricity and caffeine, the kind that always came before a big-name guest. Cameras stood ready, audience members murmured with excitement, and stagehands darted around like ghosts in black headsets, making last-minute adjustments to the lights and mics. It was a packed house that morning. Everyone had come to see a Hollywood legend, Michael Douglas. The floor manager raised his clipboard. "We're live in 60 seconds. At the table, the hosts were in their usual pre-show rhythm. Whoopi Goldberg leaned back in her chair, sipping from her mug, a serene expression masking decades of experience keeping chaos under control. Sunny Hostin checked her notes. Sarah Haynes twirled her pen nervously, eyes flicking to the audience. And then there was Joy Behar, smiling like she knew something no one else did. "Oh, this'll be fun," Joy said with a mischievous sparkle in her eye. "Michael Douglas doesn't hold back. Neither do I." Whoopi sighed lightly, her tone half weary, half amused. "Joy, just once, could you not try to start an international incident before the first commercial break?" Joy chuckled. "I don't start 'em, Whoopi. I just finish 'em." The floor manager began the countdown. 5, 4, 3. The theme music hit. The applause sign flashed. The studio came alive. Whoopi's voice boomed warmly through the cheers. "Welcome back to The View. We've got an absolute icon with us today, Academy Award winner, producer, and Hollywood royalty, Michael Douglas." The crowd erupted, clapping and cheering as Michael Douglas stepped onto the stage. He moved with that familiar, effortless grace, a half smile on his face, the confidence of a man who had spent his life under bright lights. The years had given him a kind of quiet authority. Silver hair slicked back neatly, posture straight, eyes sharp and knowing. As he approached the table, Joy leaned toward Sarah and whispered just loud enough for a mic to catch. "Still looks good for 79. The audience laughed, and Michael caught the line, smiling as he took his seat. "Thanks, Joy. I'll take that as a compliment, I think." "Of course," Joy said, feigning innocence. "I meant it. You're what we call distinguished handsome now. Like George Clooney, but with actual life experience." Whoopi chuckled. "All right, before Joy starts another category of flirtatious journalism, let's talk about why you're here. You've got a new movie, The Exchange of Power, a political thriller, and it's already getting Oscar buzz." Michael nodded modestly. "Yeah, it's been a passion project. It's about how power changes people, in politics, in business, even in families. The way ambition can corrupt, but also the way good people can stand up and make a difference." "That sounds deep," Sarah said, smiling. "You've always been drawn to roles like that, complicated, layered, not just heroes or villains." Michael shrugged. "I guess I've always liked exploring the gray areas. That's where the truth usually is." The crowd applauded lightly, and for a moment everything was smooth, professional, easy, warm. Then Joy leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "You've always been outspoken about politics, Michael," she said, her tone light but probing. "I remember a few years back you made some pretty strong statements about the state of the country. Still feel the same way?" Michael smiled politely, but his eyes flicked toward her, studying her expression. "Well, Joy, I think like everyone, I've had my ups and downs with how things are going. But I still believe we can do better, if people start listening instead of yelling." Joy smirked. "Listening's hard to do when everyone in Hollywood's talking. No offense." The audience tittered. Whoopi shot her a warning glance, but Joy just kept that sly grin. Michael chuckled, the kind of polite laugh that said, "I see what you're doing." "Well, that's fair," he said. "There's no shortage of opinions in my line of work." "But don't you think," Joy continued, "that actors weighing in on political issues just make things worse? People tune in for entertainment, not lectures." Whoopi muttered under her breath, "Here we go." Michael's posture didn't change, but there was a subtle flicker of steel in his gaze now. "I think everyone has the right to speak up about what matters to them," he said evenly. "Doesn't matter if you're a teacher, a mechanic, or an actor. We all live in this country. We all get a say." Joy's eyebrow arched. "Sure, but people get tired of hearing millionaires tell them how to live," the audience murmured. A few nervous chuckles scattered through the rows. Michael's smile thinned slightly, though he kept his composure. "You know, I've heard that argument a lot," he said calmly. "But I think dismissing someone's opinion because of what they earn is just another way to avoid hearing them. I've spent my life telling stories. Stories about justice, greed, power. Those things affect everybody." Joy. The cameras came back from commercial with the familiar theme music echoing through the studio, but the energy in the air was different now. Sharper, taut, charged. The audience clapped, but even they sensed the undercurrent. Something had shifted during the break. Michael Douglas sat a little straighter in his chair, that famous calm demeanor stretched just a bit tighter. Joy Behar still wore her practiced smile, but there was a glint in her eyes that said she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Whoopi glanced between them with the kind of intuition that came from years of keeping chaos on a leash. "Welcome back to The View. We're here with the incredible Michael Douglas, talking about his new film, The Exchange of Power, and apparently about a few exchanges of power right here at the table," she said with a wry smirk. Laughter rippled through the crowd, easing the tension a little. Michael smiled politely, but the moment Joy leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand, he knew another jab was coming. "So, Michael," Joy began, her tone syrupy smooth, "before the break, you mentioned that actors have a responsibility to speak up about issues that matter, right?" "That's right," he said simply. Joy nodded. "I'm just curious then, when you're at those big Hollywood parties, surrounded by all those people with private jets and mansions in the hills, do you ever think, maybe we're not exactly the ones who should be lecturing Middle America on humility?" The audience murmured. Sarah's eyebrows rose slightly. Sunny glanced down at her notes. Whoopi visibly stiffened. Michael's expression didn't falter, but his fingers tapped once on the table, a small, unconscious beat of irritation. "Well, Joy," he said calmly, "I don't think fighting for fairness and decency requires a tax bracket." Joy chuckled, leaning back. "Sure, but it's hard to take a moral lesson seriously from someone whose wine cellar is bigger than most people's homes." A few audience members laughed, awkwardly, nervously. Michael's jaw tightened slightly. "I think you're confusing success with hypocrisy. You can care about people without living exactly like them." "Can you?" Joy pressed, tilting her head. "Because some people would say that actors, especially the wealthy ones, live in a bubble. You don't face the same struggles the average person does. So how do you really relate to them?" Michael leaned forward now, his eyes narrowing just slightly. His voice remained calm, but it carried an edge that silenced the crowd. "Joy, I've been in this business for over 50 years. I've seen what happens when power corrupts, in Hollywood, in politics, in the real world. I tell those stories because I understand them. I grew up watching my father fight tooth and nail for every role. I've worked with crews who were just trying to make ends meet. You think empathy only belongs to the poor? You're wrong." The audience broke into spontaneous applause, a wave of approval that briefly filled the air. But Joy didn't back down. She smiled sweetly, eyes sharp as glass. "Oh, I'm not saying you don't have empathy, Michael. I'm just saying maybe Hollywood could use a little more humility, a little less preaching from the podium." Whoopi interjected, her tone firm. "Okay, let's—" But Michael cut in, his patience finally slipping. "You know, Joy, you talk about humility like it's a joke. But humility isn't about staying quiet. It's about recognizing your place and using it to do good. Maybe that's the difference. I do something with my platform instead of just talking over people." The crowd gasped lightly, and for a moment even Joy looked taken aback. Then she smiled wider, that unmistakable defiant grin that usually preceded fireworks. "Talking over people?" she repeated. "That's rich coming from a man who spent his whole life with the spotlight on him. Don't pretend you don't love it." Michael exhaled through his nose, leaning back. "I love the work, Joy, the art, not the circus." "There's a difference." "Well, the circus pays well," she quipped. The audience half laughed, half groaned. Whoopi covered her face with her hands. Sarah looked like she wanted to vanish into her chair. Michael turned fully toward Joy now, his voice lower, steadier, but unmistakably cold. "You know, Joy, it's easy to make jokes from behind a desk. It's harder to actually go out and make something that lasts. You make people laugh for an hour. I try to make them think for a lifetime. The studio went dead quiet. Every camera seemed to zoom in at once. Joy start reenacting Fatal Attraction on live television. That earned a ripple of laughter, easing the tension for a beat. But Michael wasn't finished. He looked directly at Joy, his voice quieter now, but each word deliberate. You know, I came here to talk about a film, about a story that's supposed to start a conversation. But instead, it feels like I'm sitting in a courtroom getting judged for caring.